The British government minister responsible for arms exports to Israel is on his way to speak at an event in central London this morning. We've been denied access to the event as journalists, so we're going to wait outside and try and catch him on his way in and ask him the key questions about why arms exports to Israel haven't completely stopped. Now, there's heavy security outside with police because there's a Palestine protest happening as well. So we're only going to have a few seconds to ask him the key questions before he's bundled inside by security. Let's see how this goes. Minister Reynolds, why are you still allowing arms exports to Israel?
We have
Our British
already
fighter
made measures
jets
on
are
that.
being used to
You're
kill
incorrect on that.
children in Gaza, sir. Do you have blood on your hands, Minister Reynolds? Why can't you stop these arms exports? Are the US not letting you? Do you have blood on your hands, sir? So I'm outside Chatham House where Jonathan Reynolds, the Business and Trade Secretary, has just gone in for a speech at a global trade event. We asked him why Britain is still allowing arms exports to Israel. Although there's supposedly an embargo, we know that fighter jet parts for Israel's most deadly fighter jets are still being allowed to leave British factories. They go off to the US, where they're then onwards exported to Israel. And let's remember that the British fighter jet components for the F-35 are not insignificant, as the government will try and tell you. So at least 15% of the aircraft is made in the UK. This includes the ejector seats, the rear fuselage, a whole manner of electronic components for it as well. So if Britain was to seriously put a full arms embargo on the supply of these parts, then the Israeli Air Force would not be able to use them for much longer to bomb children in Gaza. We know that this aircraft has been used to kill civilians in Gaza. There was a strike last year on the Al-Mawasi, supposedly a designated humanitarian safe zone in Gaza, where I think around 90 people were killed, civilians, in that airstrike. The minister seems like it's business as usual here. He was happy to rush inside. They took him in through this side entrance to avoid the protest that you can probably hear behind me now. There are various entrances to Chatham House, and we thought this would be the one that he'd come in on. The protesters are now coming round behind me. The minister's just slipped in, as you saw there.
Jonathan Reynolds, shame, shame, all the crimes in your name. Jonathan Reynolds, shame, shame. Reynolds, you decide. Justice or genocide. Reynolds, you decide. Justice or genocide.
So we just found out that the minister's speech was disrupted inside, and I'm joined now by the activist and author involved in that disruption, Hill Akkad, who's written a book about the Israel lobby. Hill, can you just tell us about what happened inside?
Yeah, myself and one other activist got up, took out Palestine flags, got up on the stage in front of Jonathan Reynolds and told him he was complicit in genocide. Stop arming Israel and the genocide! Stop arming Israel! Free Palestine! Stop arming Israel and the genocide! Stop arming Israel! Stop arming
So, Secretary, I say I'm really sorry about this. I think everybody wants to hear your views on trade.
Because he's the one who licenses arms exports, including parts for F-35 fighter jets, which just last week Israel used to massacre 400 people.
And what was the reaction like in terms of security, other people in the audience? Do you think they were receptive? Jonathan Reynolds, did he look like, he's a bit shaken by this at all?
We want him to know that the ordinary people of this country know that he's complicit in genocide and are not going to stop disrupting him until he ends the arms trade with Israel, and we won't accept a trade deal with apartheid Israel either.
Thank you for this invite, for this lovely...
This man and his government are complicit in genocide.
Excuse me, sir.
The F-35s are massacring Palestinians, and they have not stopped the trade of F-35s. 400 Palestinians killed last Tuesday, 200 children. One of the largest massacres of Palestinian children in history, and they're selling F-35 parts. F-35, suspend the sales. Suspend the sales, all of them, all of the parts.
We went up there and we let Jonathan Reynolds' audience and his constituents know that he is deeply complicit in the genocide in Gaza. He is approving the sale of F-35 parts via the US to Israel, which is using in its genocide in Gaza. So we believe that he should not be able to go anywhere without these facts being known to his audience and to his constituency, and that as long as British politicians are deeply complicit in genocide, there's nowhere they can go where they will not be held accountable.
And what was it like being dragged out by the security there?
It was very physical. They weren't happy that we were there, and I think we were able to get by the security on the way in, so they were a little bit rougher on the way out, but The thing is, we will continue to show up wherever they go. And the most important message is to center the people of Gaza, and the risks that we take are nothing compared to the dangers that they face every single day, and it's our moral duty to make these forms of complicity visible, whether that involves a small risk to ourselves or not.
One, we are the people. Two, we won't be silent. Three, arms embargo now, 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 now.
So I'm joined now by Katie Fallon from Campaign Against Arms Trade, who's been investigating fighter jet exports to Israel. Katie, thanks for talking to me today. Can you tell us how we know more about what Jonathan Reynolds has been doing behind closed doors in terms of his policy of arms exports to Israel?
This is one of the huge problems that, despite questions from campaigners and from MPs on this, the government has tried to hide as much information as they possibly can. So it's basically been through this legal case that has been run by our partners, Al-Haq, they're a Palestinian human rights organisation based in the West Bank, and GLAN, who are based in the UK and Ireland, have taken the government to court. And so the government's been forced to submit legal papers with what they've been doing behind closed doors. Otherwise, we wouldn't know anything.
What have we learned from the court case about how the UK government is trying to justify continuing these arms exports to Israel?
Yeah, well, one of the worst ones was from the last government, where David Cameron had been questioned by the Foreign Affairs Committee, and they said, have you seen any evidence or have you been told of concerns about IHL violations of international law, war crimes? And he said, he kind of tried to dance around it and said, there's lots of pieces of paper that come across my desk. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what's been said. This is the former Prime Minister who said this. And then through the legal case, a month after he said that, it came out that he had seen all of these documents, that he had to sign all of them off, and that basically he was lying and misleading a parliamentary committee.
When Labour won the election in July and Jonathan Reynolds became the Business and Trade Secretary, there was an embargo on some arms exports to Israel, but they created an exception for the F-35, Israel's most advanced fighter jet. Can you tell us what we've learned in court about how the government is trying to justify that exemption?
The crazy thing is, when you see all these court documents, you realise how weak the government's argument is. The Defence Secretary wrote to Jonathan Reynolds in July and said this programme is key for international security, and that was apparently enough for Jonathan Reynolds. And he said, OK, great, I'm completely convinced by all of this. So one of the things that came out in the legal documents was what they said, no further amount of evidence of war crimes or IHL violations would override us being part of the F-35 programme. So there's no limit to the crimes, and that's exactly what's been happening. 400 people were killed in one day last week, and there's nothing that they're going to do. And the other thing about the F-35, it's the deadliest and the most expensive thing that we are exporting to Israel. So it's usually hidden in an open license exactly how much that is, but it's always at least a third to a half of what we're exporting to Israel is the money of this jet programme.
Another big issue at the moment is the special relationship between the US and the UK. And actually this issue of F-35 exports is quite central to that. What have we learnt at the court case about how much pressure the US has been putting on Britain to keep these arms exports flowing to Israel?
The US political kind of dynamic is just to bully and put pressure and also threaten the UK, and to use Ukrainian civilians as a pawn and say, well, if you don't keep the parts going to the F-35 jet, then we'll stop helping Ukrainian civilians. So literally deciding to pit the lives of different civilians against each other, and somehow it's always the brown or black civilians that are the ones that pay the price for this kind of dynamic that the US decides to construct and that we all go along with.
Apart from the protest here today, I think Jonathan Reynolds or his department are going to be due back in court soon to face this ongoing legal challenge against their policy of arms exports to Israel. Can you tell us what's the latest on that front?
There's a really big date coming up for this in May, so it's going to be a 5-day hearing, which is actually usually these types of hearings maybe 2-3 days, but full 5, specifically on the government's decision to keep transferring parts for the F-35 programme into the global pool and onwards transfer for Israel. And just to emphasise again, a decision like that has never been taken where the government admitted, yeah, we think that there'll be a really high risk of these being used in war crimes, but we're going to create an exemption to let it happen anyway, and also admitted, no, it doesn't matter how many more crimes happen, we're not going to stop exporting.
Thanks, Katie. It's really important the work that Campaign Against the Arms Trade is doing. As you'd have seen from the protest this morning, Declassified was the only media outlet here asking the difficult questions of Jonathan Reynolds. So if you like the journalism that we do, please hit the subscribe button, and if you're in a position to support us financially, you can do so through the Super Thanks button below, or head to our website and join Declassified from £3 a month. Thanks for watching.